Hey guys, it's Noah here from iHollywood TV, and welcome back to another episode of iHollywood TV, the TV show, where our next guest has solved more than 387 homicide cases over a 23-year career. Please welcome Lieutenant Joe Kenda on iHollywood TV this morning. Hello, Lieutenant Joe.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It is so great to have you here with us this morning at iHollywood TV, the TV show. We're going to talk about your career, Homicide Hunter, and of course, the second season of American Detective airing on Discovery Plus. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. First off, I just want to know, and I want you to share with our audience, what got you interested in wanting to be a detective and make this a full-time career?
When I was a kid, my parents took us my brother and I, to the Pittsburgh Zoo. It's a big deal. Our first exposure to wild animals. I was like 9 years old. We went to the primate house, and there was a sign in front of the primate house that said, "Around this corner is the most dangerous animal on earth." And I thought, wow. And we all run around the corner, adults included. And it was a mirror from ceiling to floor. The adults were all disappointed. I was struck by that. It was an epiphany for me. The sign said, I'm looking at humans. And my experience taught me that that's correct. So it was interested me to how humans behave, particularly when they behave badly. And I wanted to do something about that. So I became a policeman.
That is incredible. Now, working in Colorado as a detective, what was like really the best part about the job for you?
The fascination of trying to unravel something that doesn't seem like it's possible to unravel. When someone kills someone, they're a shadow in the night. It's your job to give them a first, middle, and last name and a date of birth. And it's incredibly difficult to do, but unbelievably gratifying what happens.
Now, solving so many homicide investigations, how did your career really make the turn to bring you to television to inform and to engage with the viewers on sharing some of these most compelling stories that we hear on television?
Well, it's all my wife's fault, as it turns out. I got a letter from a guy who was a producer for a production company, who was well experienced and said he had known me when I was doing press interviews in Colorado Springs years ago. I did not recall him or his name, but he was a guy that did one of those press interviews. He moved on from news and became a producer 20 years on.
Right.
And he said, I think you could be the right guy for a concept I have for a television show called, as it turned out, Homicide Hunter. Could you come to Denver and do a screen test? He said, I will pay you $100 to do that. Wow. I'm a retired policeman. That's a lot of money. So I said, you bet. I'll drive up there. So I did. I sat down. I was fascinated by what I saw around me, the lights and cameras and people and sound equipment and so on. It was because I'm a new guy. And I said, what do you want to talk about? And he said, tell me about murder. Okay. And the floodgates opened, and I told him about murder for 30 minutes. And I stood up, and everybody's mouth was open. And I said, is that what you had in mind? And nobody said anything. And I thought, well, this didn't go well. So let me ask you again. Is that what you had in mind? Oh, yeah. And here we are. That's how.
And then here you are to this day with American Detective into its second season on Discovery Plus, which we're going to talk about here momentarily. But now, Lieutenant Joe, I read where some of the most disturbing cases still haunt you to this day. Is that true?
Of course it is. I'm a poster child for PTSD. It's a price you pay for the work. I have recurring nightmares. A river of death passes by sometimes in the evening. People say hello. It's the way it is. It's the nature of it.
How does that affect you on a daily basis when you have those type of nightmares from these cases that you investigated in years ago?
Well, imagine this. Imagine it as this. You're having a nightmare when you're awake. It is very bizarre. Unknown what motivates it. Unknown, is it a sound, a smell, a noise, a word, a face? and all of a sudden you're back in that moment. It only lasts for 15 or 20 seconds, but it is absolutely startling.
Now, I must just ask, if you could go back to 20 years ago today, would you ever have thought that you would be having a platform where not only you educate people, but you also share homicide stories that will hopefully help teach others about the job of a detective and how hard they really work to get down to the core of the case?
No one would have imagined that, neither did I. I thought I would carry on my life as I had. I drove a used car and lived in a modest home and saved money for 20 years, sent 2 kids to college, and paid for it, like everybody else. You never make any money being a policeman. It's not about the money.
Right.
If somebody does something unspeakable to someone else, you have 2 choices. You can remain seated or you can stand up. I stood up. I was proud of that. Still am.
Well, now let's talk about American Detective. It's returning for a new season, the second season on Discovery Plus, beginning January the 26th. First off, when you tackle some of the cases in this series, what's one thing you think or say to yourself every time you begin to tell a new one in each new episode?
I want to make certain that the rest of the detectives in the world and in the United States, thousands of men and women, I'm not the only one that answered the call. So did they. They stood up as well when someone did something unspeakable. And in return for low pay and suffering the slings and arrows of the press and no sleep and unhappy families, they were able to stand in the victim's shoes and look out for their interests because they no longer could do that. And that's to be admired. And I wanted everybody to know that.
Now, as you've spent your years finding murder cases, what case is one of the most intriguing that really the audiences will be able to check out in the second season of American Detective?
They all are.
Yes,
They
that's
are
true.
unique. They are unique. They are something that people can identify with. If you watch the movies or network television, there's always the multi-million-dollar motive or a group of criminals wearing $5,000 suits, all sorts of elaborate things, private jets, all that sort of thing, that no one can really identify with. And it seems very common to where it's predictable. You can watch one of those shows, it's the same script as it's been for 30 years. And it's like, okay, well, I don't know any of those people. I never met anybody like that. So I've lost interest in that. But put on a show about real humans, somebody who works where they work or does a similar kind of work and lives in the same neighborhood they do. And you have their attention. Is it someone they can identify with? These are everyday people. Bad things happen to nice people.
Yeah, that's true.
And everyone has an intriguement with that. They're intrigued by it.
What's the emergency? My cousin, he's laying on the floor in blood. Is he alive? I don't know. Okay, do you feel like you can go in there and help him? No, I don't want to go in there. I don't want to go in there.
Now, the case that viewers will find themselves really sucked into in the second season on Discovery Plus is of a homicide that happened back in 2016 in California, titled Prodigal Son. What was it about the Prodigal Son that really captivated you to begin season 2 with this case?
It's an illustration of how people can get involved in something seemingly without much impetus, without much being that upset. But still, you allow your emotions to overcome your judgment. You become angry with a loved one over something that's really not that important. But to that person, it is. And they begin to plot how to get involved and how to take their revenge on someone who has brought them into the world in that particular case. Unbelievable, really. And yet it happens all the time. I focused on getting cases in small places, not LA and New York, as is the custom in movies and so on, major cities. No, small towns, small police departments, same level of violence, same level of insanity. Who could possibly have a reason to kill? No one. And they do it every day.
Now, Lieutenant Joe, when you're watching the news and you hear about residents in California and New York looting and, killing other people, what is your thought? Like, what are you thinking of how has our country gotten to this point where all this is just happening?
Well, it is happening, and part of it is the numbers. There's now 330 million people in this country, we think. We're not very good at counting noses, let alone anything else, but we're approximately 330 million, plus a few million, give or take, I would say. In 1940, before World War II, we were 115 million. Mm-hmm. You've increased the population times 3. When you do that, it's simple numbers. There are people capable of violent behavior, and we have increased their numbers dramatically. And crime increases accordingly. Humans drive it, nothing else.
Now, I am just curious, what is the process of finding out the motive someone has to commit murder? Like, are there some cases that are easier to spot the reasoning behind the murder than others?
Well, there can be, but motive isn't as big as they make it in the movies. Mm-hmm. What's important is evidence. You don't need a motive. Maybe you're just nuts. Right. Maybe that's why you did this. Who knows what your motivation is? You're going to lie when asked. When you interrogate someone who's killed somebody, mm-hmm. you never hear the truth. You hear pieces of it, parts of it, this and that, but not really. Evidence is what drives it. What tells us it's him to the exclusion of all other people in the world? Mm-hmm. And that's what's important. Motive, okay, well, if we know one, fine. Well, you didn't find a murder weapon, so what? That doesn't mean anything either. What does mean something is you can produce clear and convincing evidence that leads you to believe that this person is responsible for this crime beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what you need. You don't need the pieces, parts that they need in Hollywood plots. Mm-hmm. You need clear and convincing evidence to say that there's been a crime committed, and the presumption is great. There's this person. There's no one else.
Lieutenant Joe, I think some of us that watch or hear homicide cases that, break national news sometimes, and we always think, how is it so hard to get evidence to some of the cases that, it could be years before they find evidence to lock someone up in prison. And I think a lot of us think, how does it take that long to find evidence? Can you explain that to our audience this morning?
There are many people who will produce an alibi through friendships, through fear, through love relationships, through all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Where you have a suspect, and this person has someone else saying he was with them in another location at the time the murder occurred. So he does not have the opportunity to commit the crime. Doesn't matter if he has motive, he doesn't have the chance to do that because he has this witness, or maybe more than one witness. Mm-hmm. So you continue to work these cases over time because circumstances change. People fall out of love. People lose their fear of this individual. And when you go back and recontact, say 3 years later, was he really with you? Mm-hmm. Well, I lied. I mean, he wasn't really with me, really. And that's where it starts to come apart. I worked a case once for 9 years before I turned it, but I turned it. And 2 people went to prison for the rest of their days, first-degree murder. Mm. Because you just keep going. You become persistent. Mm-hmm. I'm not more smarter than anybody else. I just won't stop. I will not stop. I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm going to work on this no matter what. No matter what. And sooner or later, you and I will speak again.
Absolutely. You keep going until you find the evidence, until really
Correct.
Justice is served in these cases. Now, the second episode is titled The Creek, that's airing on Discovery Plus with American Detective. We see the victim found in or in the edge of a creek. How difficult is it to work a case where a body is submerged in a body of water?
It makes it very difficult because the temperature of the water has an effect on the rate of decomposition. It's hard to say how long this person's been dead initially. It's also obvious this is a disposal site. This isn't where this crime occurred. So now we have a crime and we don't have a crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
And evidence is going to be found in the crime scene, not at the disposal site generally. There may be some things there that you find interesting, but the true evidence will be at that crime scene. So the question is, where is it? Where is this crime scene? It becomes a challenge to trace the victim in the past couple of days or maybe even a couple of weeks to see where they could have been or might have been and with whom.
What is that?
They see something in the water they don't recognize. As they get down further and closer to it,
Now, Lieutenant Joe, I do want to get your initial thoughts on one of the big homicide cases that happened in the past couple of months with Gabby Petito. Reports are now coming out saying Brian Laundrie claimed the responsibility of killing Petito before he killed himself. This was all written in a notebook. Why do you think he would keep a notebook with him admitting to the murder before killing his own self?
well, it's very difficult to say. The human mind is a complicated piece of machinery.
Mm-hmm.
I had a case where a guy was hiding at the crime scene in an abandoned building while the police are present, recovering evidence. He wrote this entire thing down in a ledger. I'm going to kill some more policemen. He'd already killed one. Maybe I will kill all of them. Maybe I'll just kill that one there. It's a rambling thing he's writing down.
Wow.
Before he gets confronted by the police and a gun battle erupts and he is shot to death. But he has this ledger where it says all this. It's interesting to me that the Petito case got the attention it received because it's a standard domestic homicide. They happen 3 or 4 times a day, every day. But for some reason, the press was fascinated by that one and they laid it out. But that is a very common crime. I got a letter once from a girl that said when I was describing the abusive male personality and how it marches forward from verbal to physical to murder, she wrote me a letter. She said, I was watching that show and I realized that he was sitting next to me.
Wow.
And I left him and you saved my life. Not bad for a TV show.
Now, speaking about fans and the messages that you receive from the viewers that watch these shows, Homicide Hunter, American Detective, how has that personally affected you? Like, what are some of the messages that you have received that really touch you?
Many times, both in writing and conversation, people will tell us that listening to the program, watching the program, had an impact on them emotionally, had an impact on them in how they deal with people in their family, had an impact in a case that they experienced as a family, and so on. So it's very, very personal when someone watches this and gets truly involved in it. And once again, identifies with the people in it. They seem like them because they are like them. These are everyday people. These aren't rich people or people with a private jet. They're not. So it drives them to really pay attention, and they certainly do.
Lieutenant Joe Kenda, thank you so much for speaking with our audience this morning about the second season of American Detective airing on Discovery Plus. It returns January the 26th, so be sure to stream it. You can always catch up on the first season, and you can always watch Homicide Hunter, all 9 seasons, on Discovery Plus as well. It is the place to watch Lieutenant Joe Kenda. You take care. You have a great rest of your day, and thank you for your time.
And thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. You take care and have a great day.
You too.
Yeah.